and welcome to this video. I saw something pretty distressing recently and it reminded me of how for a while now I've been wanting to make a video on the topic of support groups, mainly Facebook support groups. And what I saw was just one example of how these support groups can actually be pretty damaging. In this case, I'm just going to use this as an example. I saw someone on a Facebook support group for Ross River speaking about how they had been diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome, and they spoke about their debilitating symptoms. And I saw a reply to the post in one line saying, "Get used to it." And this is not the first time I've seen a reply to a post like this, not just in this group, but chronic fatigue and Hashimoto's groups as well. So I just wanted to make this short video to warn people, if you're seeking support from online groups such as Facebook, you may not like what you find there. But it's not all negative. There are some benefits to these groups, of course, and I'm going to explain how I recommend using them at the end of this video. But if you do decide to join some of these groups, there are a few things to be aware of. Number one, the majority of people in these groups are still suffering. I'll use the Ross River group for example. Let's say, I don't know, 100 people join this group a year, and say 90% of them recover and they leave the group, and the same thing happens year after year. What's going to happen is that the group's going to become saturated with people who are still suffering. The ones who recover in a matter of weeks or months, they are not going to be on this group most likely. And it's the same with other groups like thyroid problems and chronic fatigue syndrome. People do recover from these things, and when they do, they probably don't stay in these groups. Number two, in these groups, you can expect to see lots of posts of, has anyone else experienced this fill in blank symptom? I am not complaining about this because I have also done similar posts like this at the start of my journey, and this was one thing that I really did find useful. When I was worrying that, maybe a symptom was just me, it was reassuring to have a symptom validated and to realise that you're not alone. But it's just something that I wanted to point out to expect if you do join one of these groups. Because for me, over time, seeing these posts on my social media constantly just felt really unhealthy, and I did end up having to mute a lot of groups. If you're in an online support group, if someone newly diagnosed puts on a post asking for advice, it is my belief that you should never say, "Get used to it," or even mutter the words, "recovery isn't possible," even if that is how you truly feel, because it's just not fair to crush the hopes of others. And let me just paint a scenario for a second here. If you can imagine that someone's health has absolutely gone to shit and they have no idea what's going on with their body, so this person goes and sees doctor after doctor and they receive no help, and they get told they're just crazy, it's psychological, or they're just getting old. So they become too ill to work and they lose their job. Then they end up with no money, and the private clinics that could actually help them, they can't even afford to see, and their whole world falls apart. Physically, financially, mentally, their relationships have probably suffered as well, and it's possible that this person is even having suicidal thoughts. So they go looking for support in online groups, and they write about their symptoms, looking for advice and support, and somebody responds saying, "Get used to it," or that recovery isn't possible. I personally found these comments so distressing when I first joined online support groups, because I was in the position where I'd reached such a low point that I felt like if I had to accept that I was going to feel like this the rest of my life, then I didn't even want the rest of my life. This is no exaggeration. I was in such a dark place, and I'd seen doctor after doctor, and I had no help, and I got the usual, it's all in your head bullshit. And I'd quit the job of my dreams. I had to leave the country that I dreamt about living in my whole life. And I moved home because I was just too unwell to support myself anymore. I had spent a huge chunk of my savings on any treatment as well, which seemed promising with no avail. And then I started seeking help on online support groups. And straight away, I saw people who had suffered from Ross River virus for 30 plus years. And in thyroid support groups, people talking about being chronically unwell for most of their life due to the condition. And the chronic fatigue syndrome ones were even more depressing. If I had posted about my symptoms then and got a response saying get used to it, it may have just tipped me over the edge. So I think writing things like recovery isn't possible or get used to it is just unacceptable. And then there's also people in the chronic fatigue community that believe if you make a recovery from chronic fatigue syndrome, then you never had it in the first place. And considering chronic fatigue syndrome is diagnosed by process of elimination, and it's basically just a name for a collection of symptoms with no official diagnostic test, then if someone ticks all the boxes, they had chronic fatigue syndrome. And people recover from serious things all the time. Like, some people even come back from stage 4 cancer, and you're not going to say to them, well, I don't believe that you had cancer in the first place. But I do want to point out some of the benefits of these groups, because despite the fact that this video has sounded like one big massive rant, I do have some positive things to say as well. So it can be reassuring to know that a certain symptom is normal with a condition. I certainly felt like this with the Ross River virus. Even though it was distressing to see how long people can suffer from it, it sort of put my mind at rest knowing that I wasn't going crazy and that it was quite normal to feel how I felt. It can also make you feel less alone, speaking to people that really do understand how difficult an illness can be. And also there are some truly genuinely supportive people on these groups. And I have posted my videos in these groups in the past, and I always get really supportive messages back. So there's probably just a very small handful of people that do say the really harmful things, but the majority of people are nice and are supportive. I do have some tips for using recovery groups. Something I found that I had to do was unfollow these groups. This doesn't mean that you're leaving the group. So it means that you can see the posts on your own terms. So instead of seeing constant posts on your newsfeed, if you're on social media, you can just click into the group and then have a quick scan through whenever you want. I find this super useful. Another useful tip is the search button. So for example, when I was thinking about buying an infrared sauna blanket, I was able to go to the little search button and type in sauna blanket, and then I was able to read past posts of people talking about them, which was super useful. Another tip is to find the right group, because there are positive groups out there. Raylan Eagle's Facebook group, it's called ME/CFS Recovery Support and Inspiration, is a really friendly and supportive place. And while I have seen some negative comments there, the majority of the time people are nice, and occasionally there are some inspiring posts there as well. So the main takeaway from this video, if you have been newly diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome, Hashimoto's or Ross River virus, and you wish to join an online support group, just be aware that they may not be as supportive as you had hoped, and that you may come across people who don't believe in recovery. But people can and do go through these illnesses and come out the other end all the time. So don't be too disheartened if you see the you cannot recover stuff on these scripts, because you absolutely can. I mean, Emil Johansson, the world champion mountain bike slopestyle rider, he has Hashimoto's disease. My friend has an underactive thyroid who is a weightlifter, and there's even a guy who recently completed Ninja Warrior who has recovered from Ross River virus. And Beth French, a woman who had such severe chronic fatigue syndrome that she was in a wheelchair, she has since made a full recovery and has swam the English Channel. And if you're still not convinced, then I highly recommend checking out Raylan Eagle's YouTube channel and the Chronic Comeback podcast, and just listen to recovery story after recovery story. It's done me wonders. And lastly, you might be asking me, why am I still in these groups if I get so upset over these negative responses? That is exactly why I'm in them. I hope to one day be able to stay in these groups to counteract these messages of get used to it or recovery isn't possible. But I have to be honest, I do not do this much at the minute, because I'm still in the process of making a full recovery myself, and it really has helped me taking a bit of a space from them. So I dip in and out of them now and again. So that's all for this video. I hope that didn't come across too ranty. It definitely came across very ranty. You can tell that I get pretty upset when I see things like this, because I just know how damaging it can be when someone crushes your dreams of making a recovery. And I've had it before. At the start of my recovery, someone said to me, you know, I don't know if you're going to be able to get your fit, healthy lifestyle back. And, you know, that was pretty damaging to me back then when I was having a really, really hard time and really miserable. So yeah, I just get really sad when I see other people get their dreams crushed, and thankfully I didn't listen to any of the negativity back then, and if anything it motivated me to, you know, keep going and prove them wrong. So that's all for this video. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.